Right, in the last video, we ended off talking about carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Right, there's three main types of nutrients that we find in our food. Now, in this video, I'm going to follow up and talk about how these nutrients look like. Now, Mr. Lim decided to go back and make models of food molecules. So one of this here is a carbohydrate, one of this here is represents a protein, and one of this here represents a fat. Alright, so after this lesson, you should be able to identify which model represents what type of nutrient. So in this very quick video, we're going to be talking about what food molecules look like. What is the structure of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats? And you'll be able to find this information in your textbook, page 32. So let's start with carbohydrates, and let's start with starch, right? The carbohydrate which we find in our bread, noodles, pasta, which gives us energy. Now I said that starch was a very large food molecule. Now it is a large food molecule made up of many repeating units of glucose, right? So each one of these circles here is one glucose. Okay, so this is a glucose, this is also a glucose. And starch is actually a very long chain of many glucose joined together. So this line here, it just means that the two glucose is joined together. Okay, it doesn't matter what the length of the line is. It's just telling you that the two glucose have been joined together. Now some people ask me, starch, is it how many glucose in starch? Okay, so they look at this model and they think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So oh, starch have 7 glucose, is it, Mr. Lim? The answer is no, right? Starch actually can be made up of up to 1,000, if not more, units of glucose. Okay, so starch is just a very, very long chain of glucose, and my model I can only show, maybe about 7 or 8. Okay, but it's actually much longer than that. So the other carbohydrate that you need to know very well is glucose. Now glucose, right, so I said each one of these circles is glucose, right? So glucose is just one, is represented by just one circle. Glucose is the simplest form of a carbohydrate. What does that mean? Simplest form. Now if I take starch, starch is a very large carbohydrate, and I break it down. I break all these links. Right? Ultimately, I'll get glucose. Many units of glucose. So glucose is the simplest form of carbohydrates. If I break down all carbohydrates, I can get, okay, if I break down starch, I'll be able to get glucose. Now, finally, if I put two glucose together, if I join two glucose together, this is called maltose. So maltose is made of 2 units of glucose joined together. Okay, so this is how we represent it. Glucose is just one unit. It's the simplest form. If I put 2 glucose together, I get maltose. If I join many glucose together, I get starch. Okay, so starch looks a bit like, many pearls on a string. Right, that's our starch. And each one of these pearls, what would they represent? Right, every pearl would represent like one glucose. Okay, so very long chain of glucose, that's starch. Now just a bit of extra for people who are interested. Cellulose has a structure that's very similar to starch. Cellulose is also a very large food molecule made up of many glucose joined together. However, the difference is that in cellulose, the glucose are joined up a bit differently. Alright, so that's just something that you'll learn more about when you go up to Sec 3 and also beyond. Now, the second extra thing is this. Now, we've already learned that maltose is when we put 2 glucose together, right? So glucose plus glucose together. Now, glucose can be combined with other things as well. If I put glucose together with something called fructose, I'll get a sugar called sucrose. If I put glucose together with something else called galactose, that gives me a sugar called lactose. Lactose is the sugar found in your milk, right? So that's why some people are lactose intolerant, right? So that's the sugar found in milk. So this is extra. Next, we have the proteins. Now, this is how I've represented my protein. Okay, it looks like different shapes which are joined together. Now, protein is a large food molecule, which is made up of many units of amino acids joined together in a certain sequence. So each one of these shapes represent an amino acid. This is an amino acid. Okay, this is another amino acid. So what are my amino acids? Well, amino acids are the basic unit of protein. The second thing that's important is there are actually around 20 different types of amino acids. Okay, so they're not all the same. So for example, this orange rectangle could represent amino acid A. This one could be amino acid B. This one could be amino acid C. This one could be amino acid D. Right, so each amino acid is different, and so when they're joined up together, they form proteins. And because the amino acids are different, so there's A and then B and C and D, because they're different, the sequence matters. Right? That means the order in which they are joined up matters. Compare this with starch. Remember that starch is made up of many glucose joined together. Now, because all the glucose are the same, it doesn't matter what's the order that you join them up. But for proteins, it matters the order that the amino acids are joined up. Now, the last word you need to learn is this word called polypeptide. A polypeptide is just a smaller protein molecule. Okay, so polypeptides, because they're just smaller protein molecules, when I draw my diagram, if this is a protein, if a protein was 7 amino acids, then a polypeptide will be something like 3 amino acids or something like that. Alright, but again, this is not the actual number. In reality, proteins can be up to thousands of amino acids long, and polypeptides are a bit smaller, so maybe a few hundreds of amino acids long. So proteins are just very, very long chains of amino acids, and polypeptides are just smaller protein molecules. Okay, so proteins are a bit like this, this row of letters. Again, letters because every letter is different, right? Just like how every amino acid is different, right? This is amino acid A, B, and C, right? Every one is different. There are 20 different types of amino acids. Okay, a bit like how we have 26 different letters in the alphabet. And the order that you arrange them in is important. So by arranging amino acids in different orders and different numbers, we can make a huge variety of proteins. Finally, here are our fats. Now fats, the structure is very simple. Fats are made up of fatty acids and glycerol. I draw them like this. Okay, this rectangle here, this is glycerol. It represents glycerol. These 3 squiggly lines, they represent fatty acids. So, when fatty acids become joined, okay, look at this. This is the link between the fatty acid and the glycerol. When fatty acids are joined to glycerol, it forms fats. And normally, fats are made up of 1 glycerol and 3 fatty acids. Now, I would like you to have a think again about my models. Look back on my models and I want you to guess which food molecule does each model represent? Right, pause the video for a while and I'll talk about it in just a bit. Alright, thanks for trying. Okay, the first thing, let's start. I think the easiest one is probably this one here. This obviously is my fat, right? Right, because very obvious, this is actually a straw. This straw here, this is glycerol, right? And then each of these ice cream sticks is a fatty acid, right? So 1 glycerol and 3 fatty acids gives me fat. This here is colored paper clips. Now, which one does this represent? Is it a protein or carbohydrate? It is actually a protein. Why? Because like I said again, proteins are made up of amino acids, and there are 20 types of amino acids. So each color paper clip represents a certain type of amino acid, and the order matters. So that leaves us with this last one. This is just metal paper clips. This is our starch, our carbohydrate, right? Because each one of these paper clips represents 1 unit of glucose. And all the units of glucose are the same, they're just linked up, and that forms a big, large food molecule called starch. So just one recap question before we end off. Okay, and that's what nutrient is used as an immediate source of energy? And the answer is carbohydrates. Great. Example is starch and glucose. So these are the carbohydrates which give our body energy. And take note that it's the immediate source because it is the one that the body uses first. Now, if there's not enough carbohydrates, then the body will go on to use what? They will go on to use fat, which is the reserve source of energy. Alright, so that's all for this lesson. Make sure you finish up notes number 1. If you have any additional time, just have a look at the notes, watch the videos again, go through it. Make sure that you've really understood what the structure of each nutrient is. You can also ask Madam Vali if you need any help. Thank you so much and see you all soon. Okay, I'll be giving you a worksheet to do in the next lesson and also an activity to do it in the next lesson. That's all.